Like at the same time, multitasking.
Our most kind and gracious Heavenly Father, we come before Thee. Pray that Your Spirit will be with us as we get into this class, that we will gain some understandings of these things that our brother in time past has tried to share with us. Lord, about this great kingdom which You have called to come forth. And that's why we are studying it, Lord, to learn more about Your kingdom and what we need to do to bring it forth. So I pray, Lord, that as we discuss these things, that Your Spirit will be with us, that we might gain some more understanding. I pray for my brother Terry as he conducts this class, that You will be with him, that he will bring forth those items that You desire to come forth, Lord, for us to understand. So let Your Spirit be with us that we might understand and that we might grow, dear Father, and ask in the name of Your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Oh, she needs her medicine. You're welcome. Okay, according to my recollection, we're on page 22. Huh? 20? Well, we're going to start with the Lord's Prayer. We ended on page 20. How many of you had an opportunity to maybe sit down and read some of the text last night? That'd be awesome if you did. Awesome. You got to page 20, okay. He's going to take up here his concepts of the Lord's Prayer. So if everybody's got your book and you're open to page 22. It is the matter of considerable satisfaction to me, as one who believes that the Christian gospel is social in its application, to know that the first word of the Lord's Prayer socializes it. He did not tell us to use the first person singular pronoun, but he said our. Have you ever thought about that? Our Father. That's true. It's Christ Father as well. Connie just made that mention. And I think, and I've thought about this in the past, I think that's very interesting to think about the fact that this is a social thing. This is us, our Father. He's my Father, He's your Father. And everybody else that walks upon the face or has ever walked upon the face of the planet. We cannot utter that word understandingly without thinking of others. How many we might think of depends upon our situation, the general and specific conditions prevailing, or the training and experiences and resultant attitude of the petitioner, or upon all of these. It must mean at least two. So it may mean me and my wife, or it may mean me and my wife, my son John and his wife, us four and no more, as one man has wont to pray. Or it may mean those of a group of large or small, the neighborhood, the people of the town, the city, the whole nation, the whole world. It depends upon the social growth of the individual praying, and it may depend upon what you are praying about at that specific time. In your mind, are you thinking, well, I'm going to pray for the whole church, or I'm going to pray for the First Presidency, or the Quorum of 12, or the Quorum of 70, or my neighbors, or whomever you may be thinking about. That does not necessarily mean that we should exclude ourselves, because we are indeed, when we pray, oftentimes petitioning the Lord for something that is just for ourselves. Going on then over to page 23, in italics it says, in heaven, continuing with the prayer, fixes the one to whom we direct our petitions as the supreme being. Heaven we all think about as the abode of deity, the center from which the whole universe is regulated. It's been interesting to me over the years to contemplate what heaven might look like. How about you? If I were, and I've thought of, coming from a musical background and having musical training and singing a lot of musical spirituals, especially in college choir and high school choirs, you sing those old, what do I want to call them? Folk songs. That's a good word for it. Thank you, Sue. Those old folk songs, those old Negro spirituals, that was the word I was trying to find, that are really driving. If you think about where they were at the time that those songs meant so much to them, you may understand why they were thinking about heaven as having golden streets and playing a harp. Think about the strife that they had gone through or were going through as they maybe, for example, picked cotton from sunup till sundown. And I've seen movies, never been there, of people who have had to pick cotton all day long, and you see the tears and the rips in their hands. Barbara's shaking her head. You've lived down south. Have you seen some of that? It's coarse. The outside of the cotton ball is very barbed. Has 4 barbs on it, says Jim. Okay, Lou?
Well, I've picked some cotton, so I know.
You've picked cotton, okay. And did your hands get all...
When you reach down in there, that right there is going to just cut it.
Really?
Yes.
Well, anyway, yeah. So my point is, if you were involved in that kind of labor and were bound by your slave owner, and maybe your wife has been taken away from you, or your children taken away from you, or you from them, or, think about the conditions that the slaves went through. It's no wonder they thought about or wanted heaven to be golden streets and playing harps where they could relax and just worship. I get it. Now, I'm not sure that that's a correct perspective of heaven, because I think there's a lot of things that are going on in heaven, right here, beyond just that. I think there's a lot of work, there's a lot of teachings. We've heard about missionaries who have had afterlife experiences, and just before life, what those kind of things, I can't think what they're called, those kind of experiences where they come back and they've seen heaven and they've seen their Uncle so-and-so teaching somebody else, or they're going from the heavenly realm to the pit or the prison house experiences. We've seen those testimonies. So we know that heaven can be a whole lot more than just that, than just golden streets and playing a harp.
Well, and I look at the fact that when they rebuilt the wall of Jerusalem, those hands, they didn't have gloves.
Yeah.
Those hands built that wall back, and they worked from day to night. And that wall stood many years now.
Yeah, true. And the vigorous labor that would have been taken. The slaves of Egypt, another example, building. Yeah, okay. So we do think about it as being the abode of deity, but I can see how that might affect your thinking as you're praying about in heaven. But then it goes on to say, hallowed be thy name, which directs our attention to the necessity of all worshipers in prayer to utter those words of adoration and love. The love for God in the heart of the true and understanding worshiper. Oh, he's got a picture of cotton ball bulbs, and yeah.
And that's very hard, stiff.
Yeah, oh yeah,
edges.
I've felt that. You can hold that up and maybe they can see it. They won't be able to pick that up on camera, but as always, it kind of goes away, huh? Okay. Yeah. Makes me thankful for rayon and polyester and cotton picking machines, yeah. Thank you, Eli Whitney. Hallowed be thy name directs our attention to the necessity of all worshipers in prayer to utter words in adoration of love. How much do you, and many have said as I've looked at the word worship and defined worship as being the awe of God, think about that A-W-E, awe of God, as you consider hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, in 3 words, express the great objective of Christianity in the ultimate. Isn't that the goal we all have, thy kingdom come? Though in the minds far too many who call themselves Christians today, the comprehension of the word kingdom is much too narrow and too limited. There are some who, in their belief that this refers only to a spiritual kingdom, will still further limit it till it means not a group, large or small, who are bonded by a common religious belief, but only a strange experience of the heart or an emotion defined in parlance of the vulgar, getting religion, a purely personal proposition or matter. And I'm sure that in 1938, when this was written, the tent meetings and revivals were still very prominent. And we still see a lot of our Protestant evangelical brothers, television evangelists and so forth, going through that whole process of allowing you the opportunity to get religion. Say yes to Jesus and it's all okay. And the social aspect of just saying yes to Jesus is not necessarily changed unless you begin to think about, as we do as Latter-day Saints, the kingdom of God upon the face of the earth in a brick and mortar existence. Right? We have a greater responsibility due to our greater understanding that the kingdom of God is that brick and mortar place reality that we need to construct. I think that's what he's getting at. But Jesus meant far more than this. In his mind, as he taught his disciples to pray for the coming of the kingdom, God's kingdom, he envisioned the ultimate consummation of the great and universal plan deity had for man's development and happiness from the beginning of time and creation. Spiritual, that kingdom must be. And we're not denying that in any way, shape, or form. But spirituality in man cannot exist as a separate and distinct qualification or attribute. It is extensively mixed with factors physical, mental, personal, and social, which influence in 1,000 ways the quality of our spiritual life. The kingdom for those whose coming we are to pray is a condition of mankind and which will influence and determine every phase of man's existence and experience. And I have that double highlighted all the way through there. What was the city of Enoch like? Okay. Just a second, Glenn. What was the city of Enoch like? Was it just a stand around and sing spirituals all the time or sing hymns all the time? Or was it a social environment, a social interaction where somehow or another, because they had all things in common, and probably a different understanding than some have had in the past, that this all things in common meant that they were working together socially to try to make sure that every brother and sister had all of their needs met so that they too might be able to have physical things taken care of, mental things taken care of, education, et cetera, all taken care of, that they might be able to have the same opportunity to find Jesus Christ as the initial person. That was a long sentence, wasn't it?
Yeah, trying to steal what I'm trying to tell.
Okay.
Bring up.
Glenn, go for it.
Well, when Christ said that prayer, the thing I want is the most important for people to think is he knew Genesis 7 existed when he said that prayer. That's the important part we need to think about.
Did he remember Genesis 7?
He had it written, so he knew it. So he asked for it.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. He knew the kingdom of God, absolutely.
So that's why he could pray the way he does and know what he taught.
What a magnificent person Christ was. And is, yeah, okay. We can't. Yeah, we can't fathom. Precept upon precept.
Yeah, we think we know quite a little bit, but nah, we don't know what he's saying.
Yeah. But I think there's a lot of things that can be revealed to us as we go along, and as we accept one thing, something else can be added. And
one person's testimony is my father-in-law many years ago had a heart attack, and he was in the hospital, and my husband and I had gone over to visit him. And he shared, he said, I almost died. He said, I'll tell you how close I was. He said, I was aware of myself in the hospital bed, but I was seeing the other side. And he said he saw lots of people he knew. He specifically mentioned his dad and his mom. And he said, he mentioned one woman who was in a sari. So there were a lot of people he did not know. But he said, because I was quizzing him, he said it was an outdoor setting. It was a beautiful rolling hills and trees. That was just one experience. That was his. And I'm sure, and I've heard other testimonies and read books where different things are seen, but he said they were all welcoming him, and what he noticed was the beautiful, happy looks on their faces.
Yeah.
They were all happy.
A book comes to mind. I know I've mentioned it several times in some of my previous sermons, and probably remember or mention it again in future sermons. I love C.S. Lewis. I love his writings. And when I was in college, it was a liberal arts college, so we had a group reading session where all of us were assigned, the whole college was assigned to read the same book for a couple of weeks, and then we would meet in groups of 20, 25, and the whole college would discuss the book. So it caused a lot of things. And it was a Lutheran college, so there was religious things that were going along with the college quite frequently. Well, one of the books they assigned us was C.S. Lewis's book, Divorce Between Heaven and Hell. How many of you have read that? Okay, a couple of you. Well, the main gist of the book is that this man who is walking around this very gray and dingy place, and he notices things seem to be kind of easy for people. If they wanted a bigger house, they could just think of it and poof, it'd be a bigger house, and that kind of thing. I'm being very general with it. And pretty soon he comes upon this bus. And he's curious about what the bus is all about, and he decides to get on the bus. And he gets on the bus, and all of a sudden the bus starts moving, and the bus moves up. And eventually it kind of goes up, and I think if I remember right, he describes it, it's kind of like going through the ground. And all of a sudden he can kind of see the grass around him, and then the bus gets bigger and comes up and stays on top of the grass. And it's in a very beautiful place, kind of like you're describing, with hills all around and so forth. And he notices off in the distance, which is part of what reminded me, this very glorious and bright city that was, I'm guessing in my mind at least, it was several miles away with it. And the object then was for the people who were getting off of the bus to then begin to make the progression from the bus and also from where they were to this beautiful glowing city off in the distance with it. And each person and each chapter then is somebody being approached by either somebody they knew or somebody with similar experiences, telling them and talking with them about what they needed to change in their life in order to be able to go from the bus to there. One of the comments was in a physical relationship that those who were getting off the bus noticed that the grass was very sharp and cutting on their feet because they were not yet, as one of the messengers said, you are not yet solid enough to be able to depress the grass. And one person kind of walks on water because they cannot depress the water. Well, anyway, different ones go through different experiences. Some of them get back on the bus because they can't stand the idea of the changes they need to make within themselves to go to that beautiful place. Interesting book. I read it a couple times. I advise anybody picking it up. It's The Great Divorce Between Heaven and Hell, I think is the name of it. Does that sound right? By C.S. Lewis. It's one of his classics. It's not hard to find. It's similar to the Rod of Iron. Similar. Yeah, and Pilgrim's Progress. Yeah, very similar message. Okay, I'm turning now to page 25, where we talk about daily prayer and daily bread. And I'm second sentence and Rod's not mad at me, he's got another engagement. He told me earlier. Where it reads, excuse me, to think of the abode of the great creator of the universe as being anything else than in a state of perfection is incongruous. But we take it as a matter of fact and fail to grasp the idea that the ultimate purpose of the great plan is to have that same will done on earth always and unfailingly. This will require a long period of evolution on man's part, but it can be brought about and will be by the gospel of Jesus Christ having perfect play in the lives of all of us. And I mentioned yesterday that I think sometimes that requiring a long period of evolution is also going to include that millennial reign where we have a chance to have Satan bound and we can begin to tweak our minds in the way that God really wants us to have our minds tweaked with it. Down towards the bottom of the page, almost the last sentence. But note in the Lord's Prayer, in the form of the petition, is for our daily sustenance. That person who is in devotional address to deity prays only for his daily food is unchristian and so purely unselfish that he cannot know deity. Okay? But note in the, I'm rereading, but note in the Lord's Prayer, the form of the petition is for our daily sustenance. That person who in his devotional address to deity prays only for his daily food is unchristian. So purely selfish that he cannot know deity. God wants us to know everybody and to be praying for everybody and to prefer our brothers and sisters. Connie. Mike.
Just a comment that I noticed reading the Book of Mormon in 3rd Nephi, might be in 4th Nephi, but when Christ visited here and he told them, he gave the Lord's Prayer, and give us this day our daily bread is not in it.
Oh, interesting.
That is interesting.
Perhaps because it's kind of a selfish comment. Give us, of course he's saying to give us. I've often wondered and thought, this is Terry rambling again, but thought about the resources of our planet. You know, the scriptures tell us that the resources on our planet, there's enough for all and to share. Isn't it something like that? Is that correct? Am I quoting that about right? And it seems that that tells me that if those who have an abundance would work with less, that there might be more that all might have. And sometimes I know that I indulge, and I have evidence of it. Lou.
We might indulge, but what if we are starving? You know, we've got to look at this from different ways, because if I was starving, I would say, oh, thank you, Lord, for this meal.
Of course.
I wouldn't have time for this other. And doesn't it say something? I mean, look at me. But doesn't it say something about glutton?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
You know, we got to put all these scriptures together.
Yeah.
And it'll make sense to us.
No, absolutely. If I'm starving, if I'm in Africa and I have very little to eat, I'm going to be very thankful for my daily bread. Absolutely. And you're going to have a different perspective if you've had that life compared to my life with it. Glenn?
Yes, but we forget that when Moses had them all in the desert, did they starve to death?
Okay, let's turn the page. Good, Glenn. Thank you. Page 26. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, on page 26, the top of that page, continuing with this daily bread concept. If and when we utter the Lord's Prayer in the real spirit in which it was given, and with the appreciation of its genius, and ask for our daily bread, it is virtually to say, let me eat, but let me eat, but let it be only when my brothers also have that which to assure hunger and supply bodily needs. Did I say that okay? Yes. Let me eat, but let it be only when my brothers also have that which to assuage, okay, that's the word I missed, assuage hunger and supply body needs. Let me go hungry when others hunger, and if there be too little for all, let me have only my share. A little different perspective. To persuade? Okay. Yeah. Continuing then, are you at the heart Are you at heart such a Christian? Are you willing also to say, give us shelter and clothing, but withhold from me when not all have, or there is those who lack? I would be comfortably fed, pleasingly warm, and securely sheltered, but the feeling of nutritional fullness would be made distressing by the knowledge of others' hunger, and the pleasure of warmth would be chilled by learning that others are illy clad. The sense of security in adequate shelter would be shattered in the thought that others had not where to lay their heads. Lou?
It would be like for our children. See, we would give it a little bit of a slant if we had our babies in our arms.
Oh, yeah.
And they were hungry.
Yeah, absolutely. What mother or father would not give up their meal to feed their kids?
Yeah, so we've got to look at every angle.
Yeah. One of the things that's talked about then in the prayer, and trying to keep us moving, is lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. What is evil? Anything. I suppose. Okay, Glenn's got a comment, and
we here in Zion are really blessed. We don't have to worry about food. I've grown gardens, and I was able to supply half a church with cucumbers and tomatoes, and I couldn't eat it all. And that's what you do in Zion. You share your goods amongst each other, that you have gifts to do. And that's what he gives us to do, and that's our faith and our thing that we should dwell upon, not our doubts and our weaknesses. Let's go forward with positive thinking. The Lord will provide and will give you the gifts to provide for yourselves.
Sister Evans here's again.
So this has to do with binding Satan from us. And when we are tempted, you know, you bring in sin. You either have your agency to sin or not to sin. But this binds him from having us as, you know, his deity. The temptation will go away, but deliver us from sin. Sin is the ultimate, it keeps us from God. So if we are bound from sin, we bind Satan.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Jim, okay.
Sin is anything opposed by God.
Yeah, to put it very briefly.
That
Now-
scripture gained new meaning for me when Sue and I were victims of a scam that we fell for. And ever after that, I thought, when I prayed, deliver us from evil, there is so much evil all around us.
Yeah.
Sometimes we ignorantly or foolishly or just unthoughtfully fall into it.
Yeah. Yeah. You guys are passing the mic around so fast, sometimes I don't realize where it's going. Go ahead, Ben.
Jesus' brother James talks about this in the 4th chapter, the last paragraph, it's 17. So James 4:17. Therefore to him that knoweth to do good and doeth it not, to him it is sin.
So if we know better and do it not, we are sinning. Which is interesting when you consider restoration theology says that those who don't know will not be held accountable for
Right.
that which they don't know.
Right. It's us.
Yeah. He says there on page 27, just before the complete prayer area, it says, today evil is about us everywhere. I don't think any of us would argue that one. As long as human frailties permit envy, jealousy, strife, and ill will to be in our midst, so long there will be evil to avoid. Therefore we would avoid evil, even its very appearance. But again, remember that the Lord has instructed us to pray that our neighbors, our brothers, all, shall not be led into temptation. and to be protected against evils we fear. So that's that two-sided coin. Not only do we want evil to not be a part of our life, but we should do everything we can to make sure that we're not causing our brothers to be in an evil state or to do evil things towards them. And the 10 Commandments, the first 5 are for us, and the second 5 are do unto your neighbor kind of thing. Lose again.
Let's don't learn any more then. And that way we won't have to be held accountable.
For anything more. You know, I've heard that philosophy before. Yeah. Yeah, where grace abounds. Yeah, and somebody said, oh, I was watching something some time ago, and he said, or reading something someplace, and maybe it was even in here. Well, maybe I should sin more so that I could get more grace. What was it? I don't remember what it was we was watching, but in the show we were watching, it was a Christian message, but somehow or another we were talking about the Russian czars and their families, so that gives you the dates of the movie. And Rasputin, I think, was the name of the man. Yeah, Rasputin. Part of the things that he ran across in his journey was a group of monks who beat themselves and who violated themselves, and they had orgies and so forth, so that they could have more sin to be repentant of, so that they could receive more grace. Isn't that a wicked way of thinking? But that was what he ran into back in those particular days. Yeah, what? Oh, hi, Sharon.
I often think that if I give a Book of Mormon out and the recipient says they'll read it and they don't, and they leave it sit on their shelf, am I doing them any favors?
Well, you know, here's the thought too. You know, we've often said, as we just got through saying, that those who don't know aren't accountable. But I also had a 70 many, many years ago say something about who in the world today does not have opportunity to know. With our availability of communications that we have today, television and so forth, internet, and this was long before internet that this was talked about. He was referring to television antennas being on every rooftop, you know, and that's true just even in India. That was really amazing to me. We'd walk past those thatched roof and there'd be a television. So they had electricity and they had television, and there was this antenna up there. So even in those impoverished nations, they still have television with it. But anyway, the point is, the gospel is going out to the entire world via the media systems, and does that mean that they ought to be held responsible for tuning the television and trying to find out? Are they responsible for the fact that they never bothered to find out? Okay, I've got Jim, and then we'll go back to Dave.
That's not what I call it. Study to show thyself approved.
Yeah, so we need to study. It didn't come on, but to study and to show ourselves approved. That one's not coming on. Okay, Dave, we don't have a microphone for you, I guess.
Well, you know, you can hear just about anything. So we have to have some kind of credibility that says, hey, we need to listen to these people because they have the truth. I don't know how to do that. You know what I mean? You can hear everything.
Yeah, everything's out there.
Everything's out there. Oh. And let's see. I had a second.
Not truth and not truth. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Also, you know, section 1, it talks about their iniquities shall be spoken upon the housetops. I've often thought that's referring to like television antenna towers that are broadcasting it, and you've got your antenna on your house roof that's receiving it, so it's being spoken on the housetop. And that's what most of the talk news is about the sins of everybody that's in a responsible position.
Yeah, and we've talked, not only politics, but we've also talked about all of the sitcoms that are out there that are promoting alternative lifestyles of all kinds of, and we don't want to go there with that. Anyway, on page 27 and 28 then, he reiterates the prayer, goes into the different parts. I would encourage you to go ahead and read that. At the on page 29, kind of in the middle, quote, "Nevertheless, not my will be done, O Lord," "Nevertheless, not my will be done." I need my readers on. "Nevertheless, not my will, but thine, O God, be done." This, too, the Master taught us by his example in Gethsemane when he prayed that the bitter cup might pass. And God's will was done, and Jesus drank the cup to his bitter dregs. And if I were in the situation that Christ was put upon, would I have been able to go through what he went through? Well, I'm not Christ. I'm not deity. I don't have the benefits that he had. But for me to even go through, I probably would have been in Gethsemane knowing what was coming, saying, "Take this cup from me." But Christ did not.
He had no atonement of himself.
Yes. He had no atonement of himself. Yeah. Okay. I want to move to page 31. We've got about 20 minutes, and I think we're going to probably get pretty close. Uh-oh, Ben's going to speak. It's coming, Ben. We're keeping these guys really running and hopping. This is cool.
When Jesus was in the garden and he bled great drops of blood, he was sanctified through his own blood at that time. And that's Jewish understanding, and that's where we were taught that a few years ago here in the fellowship hall. And what that meant was that he had to be covered in his own blood to be able to become sanctified, which is incredible because he's the Son of God, and yet he still had to be covered that way.
Yeah.
And that was great drops of blood from the agony that he had of yielding himself to what God had required of him. He had so much love for God and the people in us that he was willing to do that in such a way that that was his sacrifice for us before the crucifixion so that he could go to the crucifixion.
Sure. He had to give up his will.
Yes.
And that's what we're called to do, is to give up our will.
Amen.
Yeah. You and I have talked about that in my office. Well, the first presidency's mad at me. They're all leaving. Or they're getting hungry. Oh, no, it's not quite. Well, the food might be getting here. Okay, going on to page 31, actually with the last sentence on bottom of page 30. It is said in the scriptures that there had been strife among the disciples. Anybody not familiar with the strife of the disciples? Okay. Even those closest to Jesus. That would be amazing to me to think that, here are these 12 men who had been walking with him for the last 3 years and listening to him and being taught. There's still strife among them. What are they fighting about? Who's the greatest amongst me? With the bitterness that always is a concomitant, did I say that right? Of such strife, one of the social amenities was omitted from the reception of Jesus and the brethren at the room of the feast. In those times and in that country, the common footgear, where footgear was worn at all, was the sandal. The soil being sandy and rocky and a great discomfort to the traveler was the acclimation of sand and pebbles between the sandal and the foot. Ouch. I've worn sandals in sandy beaches and stuff like that, and you get a pebble. Ouch, it hurts. It's not comfortable. And I'm sure their feet were a whole lot more calloused than ours. just because of what they had to endure. So one of the first acts of hospitality extended to an incoming guest by a host was for the basin of water and a towel to be brought and the feet laved, so the foot weariness and irritation by sand and pebble would be relieved and the guest enter in comfort. They probably wouldn't even be able to think too much about what they were there to think about, because the discomfort in your shoes was so great that that's the only thing you could think about. Did I say that well enough? Okay. This act of courtesy was usually done by a servant, of course, at the command or by instruction of the host, or as a result of the previous training. It was custom well established. And it's interesting to note that it's done by the servant. Okay? So when Christ steps in and decides that he's going to get the towel and the basin and he's going to wash the feet of the disciples, he's saying, I am willing to be your servant. I am here for your benefit. I am here that you might grow. I am here for you. Rather than saying, I am, come wash my feet. Come unto me and I will get you to the church, or whatever the thought might be. Lou?
That reminds me of what I said the other day, that the people that are coming over to the United States and the wall, but they're not close to the wall. And some of these people, they said that they have blisters on their feet that they can't hardly walk.
Yeah.
And some of our policemen and stuff are carrying those people on their backs. So there is good being done.
There's a lot of compassion. There's a lot of good. You got to wait for him to run around and get the mic. Turning to page 32, right in the very middle of that paragraph, first paragraph, starts off, what he meant, as I believe, when he said, an example that ye should do as I have done to you, was when there is service to do, acts of kindness to render, courtesies to extend, the question of rank, caste, or class should not be raised, but ministry rendered without question, and that in such ministry the master the great would in no way suffer degradation, but would be honored for his spirit of kindness and helpfulness. There is no need today, when man's feet are more protectively shod, for the courtesy of foot washing at the door. But there is always a need for distress to be relieved, kindness to be extended, and graciousness to be manifest. She's saying we might add that we have to come through that door. Which door? Go ahead.
Well, you put me on the spot.
Oh, yeah, a little.
Okay, so it states that the foot washing at the door. You have to come through that door to get your foot washed.
Okay, I got your message.
Yeah. And who is that door?
Well, Jesus Christ
I'm throwing it back at you
Jesus
now.
Christ is the door.
There you go.
Yeah.
So it does make sense, doesn't it?
Sure, it does. Yeah, a great deal. So I wrote down on my sheet here the question, how does our current society see the role between servant and position? Do we respect the servant? Now in India, I keep bringing that up because I was there, there's a real strong caste system, even though the state of India, the government of India, is trying to do everything they can to lessen that caste system, you know, to give everybody opportunity. The school systems in India that I saw were really pretty fascinating. I mean, they had everybody, every kid was going to school. They would go to school at different times, and they had different uniforms on depending upon when their shift was. You know, you'd see kids coming in at early morning, and they would stay till 11 or so, and then all of a sudden about 10 o'clock you'd see another bunch of kids walking and marching down the street, all going to school, and they would have a little different uniform on. And then I think there was even a third shift in Darlapudi with it. I think just fascinating. But that's a good example of how things are being leveled somewhat. There's still that psyche of the caste system that goes on over there. But how about here in the United States? Now we look at, I like Downton Abbey. How many like Downton Abbey? Like the TV show Downton Abbey? Okay. A PBS program, no commercials. Okay. But there's definitely a caste system in that household. You know, there's the very wealthy homeowner and his family, and they pretty much don't do anything. You know, there's even servants that come in to dress them. No, thank you. I just as soon do that myself. You know, there's servants to do their hair at night. There's servants to take out the potty thing, you know, in the morning, and servants to build the fire. And then you got the servants down in the basement, and there's even different levels of servants as you go down through the household. And, you know, they kind of clamor just a little bit to up themselves, for lack of a better word, you know, for good thing. But do we have any kind of a division between class or between positions, occupations, etc. in our society today? Yeah, we do. Okay. Well, we are working very diligently, I think, as a church, to try to realize that the Aaronic priesthood, and this is something I think the RLDS Church had a lot of trouble with. You know, the deacons and the priests and the teachers didn't put them in the right order, but, you know, that Aaronic priesthood was never quite as good as the elders, the Melchizedek priesthood. Is the Aaronic priesthood just as important in the overall picture? Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it's more of this than this. It's true.
I mean, if we want something done, we're not going to call the teacher to come over and help us. We're going to call our neighbor.
Yeah, I know.
So we're just like,
Yeah, we just, yeah, Dave?
Yeah, I'm just getting back from Geneseo Reunion, where we were told that at Devon Park, the Aaronic priesthood are very faithful in visiting the homes of all the members, and that they have 100% tithing statement filers for like the third year in a row or something. But it was very definitely tied in with the Aaronic priesthood visiting program that they are emphasizing.
Yeah, where the Aaronic priesthood is very active, the congregation is more vibrant. There's no question about it. Then we also have, obviously, we all talk about this at different times, we have our sports heroes, or those who are more successful in business or in certain fields and so forth. I noticed, yeah, I know, I'm meddling. I noticed this morning they were advertising the new Mahomes cereal at Hy-Vee. Patrick Mahomes, our big star for the Kansas City Chiefs, our big new quarterback that is just, you know, he just hit the, you know, he's become a big star. Well, now they've got a cereal named after him. Are we uplifting our sports heroes? Yeah. How much money do some of those guys make? To school oh yeah, that's really, considering I have 3 kids who are school teachers, I know, yeah. I know my sons are not making $5 million a year or $1 million a game or whatever, you know, that's, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I am. That's righteous judgment.
I'm saying we worship the wrong God. We're worshiping the sports.
Yeah, we do.
People who are in them.
Yeah,
and
we do.
don't support the churches at all. Like the same. How would you like to have this building full? You won't have that unless you have sports here or something.
Yeah, if we bought, yeah, that's a good point. If Patrick Mahomes came to give a talk, would we fill the sanctuary? Yeah.
well, there's jealousy on our part, folks.
We need to convert him. Who's the big wealthy guy that owns Nebraska Furniture Mart, or did? Oh, why can't I? His name's eluding me. Warren Buffett, thank you. I've often thought because we lived in the Omaha area, and I knew people who knew Warren Buffett. In fact, Cindy's sister knows Warren Buffett, and my son-in-law in Illinois worked for Warren Buffett's brother or son, I think son, with it. And so there's some connection. I've often thought, boy, I'd sure love to convert Warren Buffett. I never got that job done. Anyway.
Well, here's what I say about it.
Yes?
I wish I had his money and he had a little bit more. See, so I would be all right, wouldn't I, think along that line?
Okay, let's go to a matter of unity here in the last 5 minutes. Page 37. The believers were together. There is operation of social law known as the consciousness of kind. Persons of one mind, one belief will gather. Is that true? Yeah, I think it's probably very difficult for somebody who doesn't believe in Christianity for them to gather into the society as we know that. So that's kind of a given. It is natural and right, like beliefs in theology merely would not function so strongly as a motive for gathering, as would like-mindedness in social ideas, especially when efforts were being made to put those ideals in reality and work out the social problems. And if we think about the LGBT thing, where are they all gathering? Well, they're all gathering out in San Francisco and so forth, where they have other members of their thinking and they feel comfortable there with it. So we definitely do have to concern ourselves with getting them converted. I'm trying to skip ahead here because, okay. How do you feel about competition? Now we talked about, was that in the, about the being picked? The young, I just talked to, huh? That was in the ball games. Yeah, it was yesterday in the class, right? That was a long time ago. Okay, so we talked about, the runt being picked last. Okay, I was referring to myself. Yeah, I was. Okay. What do we think about competition on a heavy or higher level? I mean, I know that I have watched my grandchildren advance up through soccer teams and baseball teams. That's the two sports that they like with it. And there's always this attempt to try to make sure that you're in a better team and a better team and a better team and a better team. And the competition gets really fierce, and we see the parents in the grandstands just almost knocking each other down because it's my kid, my team is more important than your kid. And the real Christian philosophy, I think, is more, let's go out and have fun. And I don't care who wins so much as when we get done, we're still friends. I'm not against sports and competition, don't get me wrong. I enjoyed it as much as I could. But there is that, and we're running low of time, so I'm going to skip you, Glenn. Is that okay?
Everybody should be equal and all win. That's the way they feel.
Everybody should be equal. And maybe that's part of the philosophy the Indians need to bring into helping us establish Zion. Good thought. Okay, sorry, I tried to interrupt. Okay, so we thought about competition, and he talks about on page 45 about competition. On page 46, he talks a little bit about the dilemmas and the burdens of labor, and how not having enough caused a problem. And I wrote down some things here I thought were kind of interesting. Life expectancy in 1900 was about 46 to 48 years old. By 1915, that had increased to 52 to 56 years old, life expectancy. 1940, 60 to 65 years. 1960, 66 to 73 years. 1980, 70 to 77. 2000, 73 to 79. And 2018, our life expectancy is about 78 years old. Average. That's 30 years that we are now living longer than those did 100 years ago. Now, why is that true? Well, he gives food is maybe better, huh? But healthcare plans. Food's not necessarily, I know with the stuff we grew in my garden, or my parents grew in their garden, yeah, was definitely better. The health insurance plan was brought into existence around 1920 to 1930 when Blue Cross and Blue Shield kind of started their health care program. Disability insurance didn't start until 1956 with it. That's within my lifetime. Social Security started August 14th, 1935. Now, the Greeks kind of had their own, this is interesting, little side note. The Greeks kind of had their own retirement plan. They would store olive oil because olive oil would keep forever, according to the article I was reading. And so when they became old, whatever old was, they could start selling the olive oil and have sustenance. Why didn't I think of that when I was 20 years old? I could have had my olive oil savings. I don't know how much olive oil it would take. With it.
Jerry?
The average life, I know I'm running out of time. We're already too late, sorry. The average cost per month for retirement now is what? I was a little amazed at this. The average cost of living for retirement right now is estimated at $3,800 a month. If you have $3,800 a month, according to this, we can survive. Now, my Medicare is not $3,800 a month. How about yours? So I got to make sure to relay this to my kids that by the time they retire, it's going to be more than that if we get that far as a society. And then I asked the question, and I think could be asked in the book as well, what lifestyle am I striving for when I retire? Now I look out my deck across my creek and the Dominion sits right behind me. The Dominion are these 4-story houses that sit back there. In a gated community, yeah, okay. And I know those houses are $500,000, $600,000 a piece, and I know that there's a lot of retired people in those because I see them walking around with it, and I know that they're not living on $3,800 a month. So something great happened to them. They were able to save throughout the years, and more power to those who can save and to be prepared and to be ready. I'm not saying that we should, but I just wish I had known how much it was going to cost me to live now when I was 20 with it. And should I be better preparing? I should be just saving up my olive oil over the years so that I could live. So in some ways, I guess, I am really thankful, and I said this yesterday, I'm thankful for Social Security and health insurance because it has made us as a community a better people. We're able to live longer now than we could ever live before. Now we get back to page 52 and 53, kind of where I started yesterday morning. Maybe going to 55 because it's 10 minutes till noon and we're ready to eat. The last paragraph there on page 55, sorry. What is your thinking? What is the dynamic of your own activities towards economic and industrial contribution? Are you so purely individualistic that you feel justified in getting what you want without regard to how your getting affects the welfare of others? Have you not learned that only justifiable individualism, if individualism is ever justified, is that which is the thinking at least includes others of the group and is willing to recognize responsibility to others for the end results of his activities upon the community or the group as a whole? And that kind of individualism passes easily and logically into something else, which he will deal with later with it. I think we've gone through some interesting thoughts, and I know as I read through this book, I feel like my mind, I began to realize more clearly the changes that we need to make in our social system, the changes that I need to make in me or should have made 25, 30 years ago, so that I could produce more surplus so that others might be able to have. I think that's a Zionic concept. And the better we can grasp that, and the more we can act upon that, maybe I sound like a bishop right now, but the more I can act upon that, the greater the church will become. And as the society begins to look at the Zionic community that we're trying to build, and we begin to see a community where people work together and work with stewardships and try to help everybody achieve certain goals, the more likely the world is going to look and go, wow, they're doing something right. What is it? And I would like to be a part of that. What a witness to the rest of the world that this Zion is going to be. The other aspect of this is that it changes me, because I become more Christ-like when I begin to think about the needs and concerns of others than I am about the needs and the concerns of I with it, which is where our world's at right now. It's the I. Look at the toys. Look at the toys that men have and the things we think we have to have, and so forth and so on with it. Well, I hope you've gotten something out of the class. I feel like I have in my study and my preparation for this. Matt is going to continue tomorrow with the discussion. He may go totally down a different path, and I've given him liberty to do that.
I kind of am. I'm going to refer to this book and it's out of it, but I kind of put my own thing.
Good, okay. I would encourage you, I gave you all a copy, okay? And I would encourage you to do kind of the same thing that I did, was go through, and you can see there's a lot of marks in there, and study it. My pages are worn out. I had to re-glue my cover back together again. And see what you glean from it. See how it changes you as you begin to think about the social awareness that I think is necessary for Zionic living, and as we begin to move forward with our endeavor. Thank you ever so much. We'll, now I'm going to turn the floor over to Mike. There he is. Mike was talking about announcements and a prayer for the meal. Is the meal here?
Yes, it is.
All right.
So 1 o'clock, we'll be back in here for President Patience class, and also again, we'll meet in